Well, the Cowboys have been discussing with Brian Schottenheimer how that situation would evolve. Talking to Kellen Moore, they've met with Robert Saleh, they've met with Leslie Frazier. The last 48 hours have been put into Brian Schottenheimer.
If you happen to be a fan of a rebuilding team or a retooling team that recently fired their head coach, one of the most exciting moments could be anticipating who the next head coach is, particularly if your favorite team happens to be a team that has the longest NFC championship drought in the entire conference. Particularly because the owner of the team decided to can the previous coach that brought you tremendous success. And unfortunately for the Dallas Cowboys, they happen to even take this away from their fans. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications because we've been uploading so much content on this channel lately. Every single brand new head coaching hire, everything that's happening in the conference championship, everything that's happening in the playoff games, anything you need, we have it on this channel. Now that we get all that out of the way, work! You saw us dominate last weekend in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. You've seen us dominate in the NBA recently on a day-to-day basis. You guys have been blowing up my DMs telling me how much money you're making, and now PrizePicks is giving us another free square. And we're going to turn this free square into some guaranteed cash. First, if you haven't signed up for PrizePicks, make sure you go to the link in the description down below. Use my promo code Mikerophone to get a free $50 when you make an entry of $5 or more. And then if you want to make some cash, follow these picks and enter them ASAP before they change the projection on that. Obviously, pick Jaden Daniels to go over 0.5 passing yards because that's guaranteed. I'm pairing that with James Cook getting over 2 receptions because I feel like Josh Allen's going to check down to him a lot that game. Then I'm pairing that with Terry McLaurin getting less than 5 receptions and Devontae Smith getting less than 4 receptions. Now, I'm going to do a 4-man power over here, but obviously, if you want to lower your payout but maximize your odds of hitting, then you could do a 2-man or a 3-man. And I give away additional picks on my Instagram story at the Flight Mike and on Snapchat Flight Mike Snap. And thank you, PrizePicks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Over the past year, the Dallas Cowboys have reached a brand new level when it's come to incompetence. I mean, I can't think of a single moment this past year where the Cowboys have made a decision that I truly could get behind. And this stems all the way to last offseason where Jerry Jones said this.
How do we feel about where we've been in this free agency? We feel great about what we've been in free agency. All in. All in. All in. We're all in with these young guys.
And then proceeded to make a series of terrible decisions for the front office, primarily waiting way too long to pay Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, which siphoned valuable cap space away from this team that could have been used to sign a running back, which this team desperately needed. I mean, Derrick Henry was clearly interested in signing with the Dallas Cowboys, but they didn't even call him.
Did Dallas pick up the phone? Were they involved in the Derrick Henry sweepstakes?
Dallas didn't even, not at all know what's going on over there, and but they weren't in content. The Cowboys never called at all.
Wow, never even picked up the phone. Now, were they on your radar as you're going through the process, or did that surprise you? I'm stunned hearing that the Cowboys never even picked up the phone.
That's a great organization, and I mean, it's been a great opportunity, but I'm thankful that I ended up here in Baltimore, somewhere I wanted to be.
And then when they asked Jerry Jones why they didn't even call Derrick Henry, he gave some lame excuse.
It's beyond whether or not we have Derrick Henry or not. Derrick Henry is having a career year. I don't know if he'd be having that career year in our situation. And that's really something you really do have to look at. Derrick Henry didn't fit because principally of managing the cap in anticipation of the players that we were going to sign weeks later, or anticipation of the players we're going to be signing in the future.
It was just such an embarrassing season. I mean, early on in the season when the Dallas Cowboys got off to a poor start, Dak Prescott said this. And then when they got destroyed by the Atlanta Falcons, you saw Dak Prescott literally saying that the team sucks on the sidelines. There are just significant cultural issues with the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, Jerry Jones is flying into practice on a helicopter. Ezekiel Elliott was habitually tardy, and the incompetence was on multiple levels. I mean, yes, you could blame Mike McCarthy for some poor play calling and game management mistakes, but this past season, he never even stood a chance. The previous 2 seasons I'll hold against him because he had one of the most talented teams in the entire NFC, only to choke in the first round of the playoffs versus the Green Bay Packers, and despite having one of the best defenses in the NFL, he'd lose in the previous 2 seasons in the playoffs relatively earlier than he was expected to. But it's not just that. I mean, the front office was a disaster. You could have traded for DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, Mike Williams, Deontay Johnson. You could have brought back Amari Cooper, but what did they decide to do? Well, they decided to overpay for Jonathan Mingo, trading a 4th round pick for one of the worst players on the Carolina Panthers. You could also go back even further when they decided to trade a 4th round pick for Trey Lance, but they didn't even play Trey Lance this past season up until the final game, so they could avoid paying Cooper Rush a $500,000 incentive bonus. It's just on multiple levels, this team just seems to not know what they're doing, and Jerry Jones thinks he could manipulate his fans into having faith in them. Because at the end of the day, and I'll say this as a diehard Dallas Cowboy fan, we all know that the Cowboys don't care about winning Super Bowls. The Dallas Cowboys care about making money. They care about generating as much media attention towards them as humanly possible to get the media talking about them to stay relevant. They're like that girl that was popular in high school that you follow on Instagram that has nothing going on for her now, so that she decided to soft launch an OnlyFans account and won't stop posting it on her story. Doing anything for attention, but eventually not succeeding, because every single time someone talks about her, it's to mention how down bad she is. No one is talking up the Dallas Cowboys. They're an embarrassment. And going into this offseason, I have never been more pessimistic about this team. If there's one thing we could have learned from this past season, it's that if a team is able to nail their hiring of a general manager, draft a solid quarterback, and hire a good head coach, then they can easily turn their season around in as short as 1 year. The Washington Commanders were the perennial joke of the NFC East. Nobody was ever taking them seriously. They've had moments where they were aggressive in trading up for a quarterback like Robert Griffin III, only to sabotage his career following his rookie season. I mean, this team could not get anything right. And within a year of selling this franchise to Josh Harris, an owner that isn't necessarily known for winning championships in the NBA as the owner of the Philadelphia 76ers, they went on to hire Adam Peters, draft Jaden Daniels, and hire Dan Quinn. The result? Well, they're in the NFC Championship game 1 year later. And it's just, you look at the decisions that the Commanders make, and this is a team that you seriously could get behind. Whether it's drafting Jaden Daniels, bringing in Cliff Kingsbury as the offensive coordinator, signing a still relatively good but past his prime Bobby Wagner, bringing in a bunch of Dan Quinn's defensive pieces from Dallas over to their division rival, players like Dante Fowler and Dorrance Armstrong, Tyler Biadasz on the offense. I mean, Jaden Daniels only has a 34-year-old Zach Ertz and Terry McLaurin to throw the football to. Obviously, you're seeing De'Ami Brown now emerge a little bit as well, but he also has a dinosaur in Austin Eckler in addition to Brian Robinson to hand the football off to. His offensive line is okay. They're not necessarily the greatest, and they're in the NFC Championship game. A little bit over 2 months ago, they made a trade for Marshawn Lattimore, and we know that's going to pay off in a huge way eventually. I mean, once Dan Quinn gets his cornerback number 1, it's game over for this team. And then meanwhile, you have the Dallas Cowboys who are just peddling false hope to their fans. Already has 60% of their salary cap space allocated towards Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and soon Micah Parsons, and are currently trying to find their next head coach. Now, I will admit, some of the candidates look very promising. Like the Dallas Cowboys brought in Robert Saleh for an interview. And personally, I don't think that's the worst idea, because historically, the Dallas Cowboys' biggest strength was their defense, but that left with Dan Quinn. Other interviews weren't necessarily the most exciting, but they made sense. I mean, the Cowboys always were interested in Kellen Moore. He used to be their offensive coordinator, so they completed an interview with Kellen Moore. Some of these were just not exciting at all whatsoever. Like, for instance, the Cowboys decided to interview Leslie Frazier. And I want to say this may have been a Rooney Rule interview, because Leslie Frazier was once the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings from 2010 to 2013, but he wasn't necessarily the greatest. Since then, he's just been hopping around the league as a defensive coordinator, but he hasn't really stuck anywhere for a long time. And this past year, he was the assistant head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. But the biggest name on this entire list that truly is upsetting Dallas Cowboy fans is none other than Brian Schottenheimer, and he is the leading candidate to potentially be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And this is probably the most frustrating candidate on this list. Because if you take a look at Schottenheimer's track record, it isn't necessarily impressive at all whatsoever. He was the QB coach of the Washington Redskins in 2001, where he had the 28th ranked offense. He was the QB coach of the San Diego Chargers from 2002 to 2005, and Drew Brees didn't really figure out how to be a good quarterback until the 04 and 05 season. He was terrible in his first 2 seasons with the team. He would then become the offensive coordinator of the New York Jets from 06 to 2011, and they weren't good on offense at all whatsoever, despite the 2009, 2010, and 2011 Jets being stacked. I mean, if you just take a look at Mark Sanchez's completion percentage during his Jets tenure, that's all you really need to know about Brian Schottenheimer. Mark Sanchez was in the mid-50s, and he wasted some of the best defenses in the NFL by not really being able to do anything on offense with the Jets. He would then go to the St. Louis Rams from 2012 to 2014, where he would lead them to a 25th, 21st, and 21st ranking on offense, before deciding to move over to Georgia in 2015, where he would lead them to an 85th ranked offense, which got their head coach fired. He would then come back to the Colts as a quarterback coach, and they'd be 30th in offense in 2017, although granted Andrew Luck was injured back then, before having pretty good seasons in 2018 to 2020, but that's because he had Russell Wilson under center, and I guess he couldn't even slow down Russell Wilson, before going to the Jaguars in 2021, where he got the opportunity to coach Trevor Lawrence and would rank them to a 32nd ranked offense with Trevor Lawrence and of course widespread dysfunction in the team. Now the Dallas Cowboys didn't have one interview with him, they had 2 interviews with Schottenheimer, meaning that he is their leading candidate. They didn't pursue Ben Johnson, they didn't even give Joe Brady an interview. There's so many better head coaching candidates still available. I mean, Liam Cohen is still available technically. He still hasn't signed the extension with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They didn't interview Todd Monken. They didn't even bring in Cliff Kingsbury. They decided to hire Marty Schottenheimer's son, who's had a very pedestrian track record, presumably because he would just smile and nod and listen to everything Jerry Jones wants him to do. And it just sucks because you could clearly tell the Cowboys don't know what they're doing. I mean, they could have conveyed to Bill Belichick that they would happily hire him if they just came out and said that they were firing Mike McCarthy with just a few games left in the season. Or if they just fired Mike McCarthy a little prematurely. Our season was going nowhere anyway. But even then, they decided to wait a week to fire Mike McCarthy, and then they didn't even interview Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn, and they started scrambling, putting out Deion Sanders rumors. But I knew this decision was very likely to happen before it was announced, and I will admit, I was hoping that this wouldn't be who we would end up going with, but it's official, ladies and gentlemen. According to Adam Schefter, the Dallas Cowboys are hiring offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer as their new head coach. Brian Schottenheimer is known as a career assistant. He ain't Brian no more. He is now known as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, I love how Jerry Jones is making this sound like it's a coveted job, because it really is not. Schefter continues to say at the age of 51, Brian Schottenheimer lands his first NFL head coaching job. He's going to have his introductory press conference on Monday, January 27th. The Cowboys interviewed Eagles offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, former Jets head coach Robert Saleh, former Vikings head coach Leslie Frazier, had a conversation with Deion Sanders. In the end, they hired their offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer. He's no assistant anymore. And it gets way worse once you find out who the Dallas Cowboys are looking at for their defensive coordinator. So how do I feel about this? I mean, I gotta admit, I'm used to being disappointed by this franchise at this point. I was at least hoping that if they hired Deion Sanders, I'd have great content to make for you guys all season long about Deion Sanders doing Deion Sanders stuff. But I feel like the Dallas Cowboys are going to be in the cellar of the NFC East for the foreseeable future. I feel like we're going to switch places with the Washington Commanders for the next decade. This team has no cap space. They clearly don't know how to manage the salary cap, as you saw with CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. Lord knows we're probably going to overpay Micah Parsons as well. The one redeeming quality that the Cowboys have always had was the fact that they were really good at drafting players sometimes. But my top candidate in this head coaching cycle, the one individual I wanted the Cowboys to hire, was Robert Saleh, primarily because the Dallas Cowboys' identity was on defense over the past couple of years. So elevating your offensive coordinator from a year where the Cowboys' offense wasn't that good just gives you an idea of what this team is really about. Yeah, Dak Prescott was out all season long. The Cowboys ranked 21st in the NFL in total offense. They were 31st in the NFL in defense. You could either point the blame finger at Mike Zimmer or Mike McCarthy or Brian Schottenheimer or the fact that Dak Prescott wasn't around, but even when Dak Prescott was playing, this team was not good. And the thing that really pisses me off the most is we had a very capable head coach coaching for us on defense last year that went to our division rival and completely turned that franchise around. He went to the laughingstock of the NFC, the Washington Commanders, and in one season with Jaden Daniels and Adam Peters was able to take this team to an NFC championship. And what are we doing instead? We're promoting our offensive coordinator that led the 21st best offense in the NFL that doesn't really have that good of a track record, all because he's gonna sit down, smile and nod and listen to everything Jerry Jones says. How could you have any hope or optimism for the future if you're the Dallas Cowboys right now? There's virtually none. We're paying Dak Prescott the most money out of all QBs in the NFL. We're paying CeeDee Lamb the second most money out of all wide receivers in the NFL. This team is already maxed out in terms of the salary cap. There's no room for improvement. And it's not like Brian Schottenheimer is going to turn this franchise around. Not in a division with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders, who are in the NFC Championship and still have the third most cap space in the entire NFL. I don't even know how I feel about this next tweet. I mean, Jeremy Fowler says that sources consider former Bears head coach Matt Eberflus a prime candidate for the Cowboys defensive coordinator job under head coach Brian Schottenheimer. Eberflus was a Cowboys assistant from 2011 to 2017. I mean, in that particular instance, I'm just hoping that Eberflus is one of those individuals that's a very good defensive coordinator, but is just a terrible coach. And primarily the reason Eberflus was canned was because, well, he just didn't know how to manage close games. He's 5-19 as the Chicago Bears head coach in one-score games. I think the strategy here is clear. There's only one strategy at this point, and I really hope it works. And that's the fact that the Cowboys are entering a rebuild, and they pretty much need a lapdog to sit through the rebuild and get paid very, very well for it. By the end of their rebuild, hopefully following the 2026 season, they have the #1 overall pick, so they could select Arch Manning. At that point, Dak Prescott's contract will only have 2 seasons left on it, but the cap hit for Dak Prescott's contract shouldn't be as bad, and it should be a significantly more tradable contract. I said this last offseason, I'll say it this offseason, I'll say it next offseason. Don't expect the Dallas Cowboys to be competitive at all whatsoever. Their contention window has slammed shut. This is our third upload of the day, so if you guys didn't know, the Las Vegas Raiders also hired Pete Carroll, which is an individual that the Cowboys could have easily hired as well that I would have accepted. We have a separate video on that. And the Jacksonville Jaguars literally stole their recent head coach. I'll leave both of these videos in the end screen. I'll meet you guys there. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.